The dark night of the soul is often seen as a very scary or fearful phase in your spiritual awakening. In this video, I'm going to dispel the myths around the dark night of the soul, and I'm going to give you some valuable information and tips on how to best navigate it. But first, you need to understand what the purpose of the dark night of the soul is. So here on earth, here as you're living your life, right, as a human being, you get comfortable, you get acclimated to the patterns, and you are shown patterns from the very moment you arrive here and you're born, right? You start to get into patterns. You go through societal patterns. You go through education. You go through maybe some religious training, and that establishes patterns in your life. Now, maybe you have an awakening where you start to realize that things don't seem quite right. Maybe you're not feeling like you belong here. Maybe you start having synchronicities. Maybe you start getting divine messages. You have a spontaneous awakening, much like I had, where you have an out-of-body experience or you connect with your spirit guides. So these are things that are designed to assist you in the awakening process and really allow you to step out of the patterning, step out of the known and into the unknown. Now, initially, these types of events may appear as very exciting. They're just very exciting to you because they're new. They represent some of that magic that maybe you've always heard about or heard others experiencing or talking about. Now it's happening to you. That's a very exciting time, right? But something interesting happens after that phase passes. We tend to feel like we get plunged into darkness. It's almost like we are unplugged from all of that magic and we're left with the old. And that gives rise to the dark night of the soul. And the interesting thing is, during the dark night of the soul, especially in the initial stages of the dark night of the soul, we're left with all of that humanness, all of that conditioning, all of that old that was previously comfortable, and a lot of that no longer resonates. So that could lead to a dark period. That could lead to a spiritual depression. And what's really happening is that new that you've experienced or that you have remembered in that truth of who you are during your awakening is really starting to come forward. But in order to create the space for it to fully land and for you to embody that energy and start walking this planet as that new you, you need to really put down the weight of all of the old, all of the limiting beliefs, all of the old programming. You need to process unhealed emotions, the traumas. Those types of things are all available in that space known as the dark night of the soul to navigate through. Now, the interesting thing is when we get into that, we find ourselves wanting to try to get back to all of that magic. And you may find yourself resisting that very important phase in your awakening. And it's going to feel really, really dark. But it's going to feel dark because you are supposed to be in those dense emotions, right? A lot of times the dark night of the soul is called ego death. And I look at that as it's a very binary, very human way of thinking about it, right? There is no life, there is no death. The ego really doesn't die. But what happens is all of these aspects of us that have been controlling us over the years start to come up one by one to simply be reintegrated, to be seen. You could call that inner child work or shadow work or energy healing, however you want to term it. But these aspects rise up in this space known as the dark night of the soul to be seen, to be processed, to be loved. And a lot of times, again, we resist that. It's like walking into, you're in this amazing field, a sunny day, and you walk into this dark forest, and you know deep down the only way to get back to that light is to navigate through this forest, except you don't know how long it's going to take you. You don't even know what direction to go, right? Well, that opens you up to really starting to allow yourself to trust in your journey. And you start just taking these little baby steps forward, and that means heading deeper into that darkness, not running from it. If you turn around and retreat, you go back to where you came, which is the old familiar life that really no longer resonates anymore. And let me tell you this, and drop it in the comments if you've experienced this, but once you experience these amazing synchronicities, these amazing contacts with your guides, multidimensional beings, your star guides, even deceased relatives, once you experience that, there really is no going back. You have no choice but to head into that dark forest and start to trust yourself in navigating through that space. And that is really what's known as the dark night of the soul. So if you're, wanting to find out how to reconnect with yourself, to reconnect with your magic, to reconnect with that truth of who you are, you really have no choice but to navigate through that darkness. Now, that darkness manifests in all sorts of ways, right? If you have a lot of fear around maybe some of that contact from your guides, you may start to experience some dark types of psychic attacks. You may experience inner child healing, trauma that came up when you were younger as these aspects rise up to be seen and to be felt. A lot of emotional energy, dense emotional energy will rise up, will activate within you during this time. And you have to be able to have that groundedness, that anchoredness, that presence of mind to be able to sit there and allow yourself to feel the dense energy as long as it takes. Again, that's why we call it the dark night of the soul. And I know people say, well, it's ego death, the ego is dying, but the ego never really dies. The ego has a purpose here, and that's to keep you safe. But when the ego starts to try to keep you safe energetically, not just physically, then it really takes control over your life, and it keeps you limited and keeps you small because it doesn't want you to lean into the unknown or expansiveness, because then it feels like it loses control. So dark night of the soul is a way to thrust you into this void, this spaciousness, this period in between the old and in between the new, so that you could reintegrate all of this energy that's been fragmented within your body, within your field, from all of the experiences, the programming, and the traumas that you've experienced up until this point, right? Most of which is from childhood, okay? Some of which could be from other realities and other lifetimes as well. But that dark night of the soul is really that period in your awakening where you essentially are isolated, and your higher self, your guides, create the space for you to essentially be isolated from that old you, so you can start to take control over your life, right? It's grounding consciousness. And in order for you to do that, you need to be able to start to become aware of the unconsciousness that's been running your life and keeping you small. That's the ego. And the ego's doing what it knows based on your belief system, your programming, right? And all of your trauma, as I've said earlier. So the dark night of the soul is not a phase to be feared. It's really a phase to face your fears. So the more confidence you have, the more fortitude you have, the more strength you have, the more worthiness you feel, the more love and compassion for yourself that you feel, will better help you anchor that higher frequency energy and be able to stand centered and aligned during this period. Because in that period of the dark night of the soul, you're going to feel like you've been cut off. So for me, I had these amazing experiences. They were coming at me left and right, day in, day out, right? So much that people around me were experiencing it as well as I was experiencing it. That's how much this energy, this new energy, was moving through my experience and through my life. And then I entered a phase where a lot of that seemed to be removed or cut off. Now, I still had connection with my guide, and I remember asking him, my spirit guide, like, what's going on? And it was really time to heal, time to sit with all of those wounds, all of those fears, and allow myself to feel it all so that I could reintegrate that energy. Okay, because when we get traumatized, we fragment our energy and we become a lesser version of who we truly are. But through Dark Night of the Soul, you have an opportunity to reintegrate that energy. It's like looking around in a dark room and finding aspects of you that have been hidden away because of fear, shining the light of consciousness on them and inviting them back into the mix, right? That's a reintegration process. And in order to do that, you need to see these aspects and feel these aspects and hold space consciously and allow them to come back into the mix. Bring it back in. That shifts your energy, that shifts your field, that raises your vibration, and it allows you to become a newer, higher frequency human, a higher frequency version of you. I call that the new you. You have the old you, which is like pre-awakening, programmed, unconscious, and the new you is the birthing of a multidimensional, energetic consciousness you. But that gap in the middle, really, we call that the dark night of the soul. And again, I want to reiterate, that is not a phase in your awakening to be feared. You don't want to retreat out of that forest back to the old. You want to have that trust and that intuition, follow your intuition, follow your guidance. And the more you gather up those energetic fragments that have been traumatized and allow yourself to feel them, the more your intuition comes online. You start to become more present, where you start to be more tuned in to the subtle energy, which is that new you that is ready to come forward. Okay, so all of this stuff is going on during this dark night of the soul phase, that there is this belief or label that that is a bad phase of the awakening, when in fact, that is the phase of your awakening where you can make the biggest strides if you commit to allowing yourself to anchor into the body, become present, and have the courage to feel all of that dense energy, all of that fear, all of that anxiety that is ready to come up to be alchemized. And once you commit to doing that, you go through the process, whether you're working with somebody or you're navigating it on your own, whatever that looks like for you, just know that during that process, you are becoming a higher frequency version of you. You may not know it at that moment, but you are, because there will be a day in the future, a moment in the future, where you exit that dark forest, and all of that light that has been integrated in the darkness becomes available to you, and it happens in a moment. And that is an amazing, another awakening essentially in your journey that is just so powerful. And I do want to mention that these dark night of the soul periods, they don't just happen once. They can happen many times. You're going to be guided into periods where you need to do that deep healing. So the recipe, the instructions are the same. You allow yourself to just detach from not feeling that spiritual connection in the moment and feel whatever it is that's rising up within your experience at that moment, and allowing that energy to be reintegrated. Okay, I always talk about this journey being a spiral staircase, right? We're always coming back around to revisit aspects of ourselves from a higher perspective. So nothing ever dies, okay? It loses its charge the more you decide to sit and face it and shine the light of consciousness on it, but it never dies. And we don't want it to, because these are aspects of you, and we don't want to ever discard any aspects of us in our journey. What we want to do is we want to hold space and love them and bring them into the heart, show compassion for these wounds, right? Because they've done the best that they could with the limited consciousness that they had in the moment. It's time to open up and hold that space. And in that darkness, when you're feeling that dense energy, when you're feeling that fear, bring it back to the heart and allow that energy to join you. And there will be a point in time when you exit that dark forest, and all of that light that was there before as you entered it, and so much more that you've integrated within that darkness, just becomes available to you. It's such an amazing time. There's a link in the description for a free masterclass, and I will share my story with you and show you what it takes to navigate that darkness. So if you're interested in learning more about that, go ahead and sign up for the masterclass in the description.